Insurance industry and its transactions are very critical to every and any country. I mean, not just for its, establishment purpose, but also for its economic input. Well, hello and welcome to Islamic Finance Weekly. I am Rahma Say Muhammad. And the last episode we discussed on Takaful, its pains and gains. And on today's episode, we'll be discussing on Takaful Insurance or Islamic Insurance Act. And today we're in Nur Takaful Insurance Limited with the Vice Chairman, Aminu Tukur. Assalamu alaikum, Aminu Tukur. Thank you for having us.
Alaikum salam. Good afternoon, Rama, and you're welcome to Nur Takaful Insurance Limited.
Thank you for having us. To dive right into the discussion of today, let's highlight the Basic Conventional Insurance Act and then the Takaful Insurance Act, if there's any.
Okay, so what we have is the NAICOM Act of 1997 and the Insurance Act of 2003. When these acts were passed, especially the 2003 Act, it gave NICOM the powers to license both conventional and insurance companies. However, the Takaful Act did not come into play until 2013, when NICOM actually issued guidelines. An act was not passed because the act had already been passed by Parliament to allow them to issue it. So the guidelines were issued, the first set of guidelines were issued in 2013. And that allowed NICOM to first to issue licenses to Takaful operators. New Takaful happened to be the first Takaful operator to receive license in 2016, May of 2016, to commence operations as a full-fledged composite Takaful operator. And we fully commenced operation on January 2nd, 2017. Basically, the Insurance Act of 2003 gives NICOM the powers on how and who should be issued licenses, both conventional and Takaful operators. It also gives NICOM the powers in terms of charging levies, in terms of how the companies should be set up. Obviously, because this act is passed by Parliament, Parliament is not going to go into the little nitty-gritty and operational issues. They will allow the regulator, the National Insurance Commission, to provide various guidelines. Guidelines evolve, guidelines are improved on, guidelines change on a regular basis. So over the years, NICOM, as it observes, would be changing this. It is clear an act is always difficult, more difficult to change, because you have to go through either the House of Representatives or the Senate to change acts. So a lot of powers are usually given to the regulators. So the act just gives NICOM the powers to issue licenses and regulate players and operators in that market.
All right, thank you. Let's look at the basic differences between the Conventional Insurance Act and Takaful Insurance Act. I mean, Conventional Insurance Act has its guidelines, has how they operate, while the Takaful, which is Islamic insurance, has a guideline of how they operate. Let's look at the differences.
Okay, so like I mentioned earlier on, what we have is an act that gives NICOM the powers. NICOM will now come down and issue guidelines on a regular basis for both conventional and Takaful. Now, the guidelines have always existed for conventional, because the conventional operators have been operating in Nigeria since the 40s. So these guidelines have always been there. They've always changed. They've always improved on. However, the first guideline for Takaful, none existed until 2013. These were issued in 2013. Since 2013, additional guidelines have been issued as and when required by the regulator. So it is that guideline that were issued in 2013 that allowed companies like New Takaful and other Takaful operators to commence operations. The guideline specifies on how these operators should perform their roles and responsibility in terms of what kind of model. Under the Takaful model, you have three types of model. You have the Wakala model, you have the Mudaraba model, you have the hybrid. So this act, the guideline specifies what kind of model the operators can work. It also gives in terms of guidelines on the board. And very importantly, under the guideline is the Sharia board, or what we call the Advisory Council of Experts. This is an independent body that every Takaful operator must have and maintain to ensure that its operations, its products are in line with Sharia principles. I think for me, that's one of the major differences in our operational guidelines for the Takaful operators as against the operational guidelines of the conventional. In fact, that is what guides us in everything we do. Sharia must be there. Sharia must be taken into consideration. And in everything we do, we have to go back to that. It also recognizes, the guideline also recognizes that NAICOM, the regulator, must have its own Sharia board, which they call the Takaful Advisory Council. Now, under the conventional model, what you just do is go through regular approvals. Whereas under the Takaful guidelines, you don't only just go through regulatory approval, you also have to get additional approval of the advisory bodies, both the internal advisory body and that's managed and maintained by NICOM.
Thank you. Talking about evolution and how you say guidelines change over time, NICOM recently released some, regulatory sandbox and market conduct and what do you call it, Takaful insurance. How is the industry, or has the industry perceived this? How is this going to help in, bolstering financial landscape in Nigeria?
Basically, what the Sandbox does, the Sandbox guidelines, allows you to test things in a safe environment. Like a child, you create a sandbox and you keep the child in there while the parent is busy. So the child plays, they have their toys there, and then over time you check up on the child. So what NICOM has done is provide us with an environment, a safe environment, to test products, especially on the tech side. I want to believe that one of the reasons why NICOM has provided this sandbox is as a fallout of life after COVID. For all of us, life changed after COVID. We all became more tech savvy. We all became more digital. So NICOM realized and felt that, look, we have to encourage the Takaful operators to be more tech savvy. So they said, look, go into this test environment, test your products, improve on your products, make it more available. We're moving away from the brick and mortar. People are looking at the digital age, the younger generation.
Right.
Apart from that, it allows people to have more financial inclusion. The average young person today does not want to go into an office. He or she wants to do everything and conclude it on their phones. So once you're able to play within the sandbox, that now gives you the opportunity to improve on your products, and then you go live. So we at Takaful, we've accepted that challenge. We have a few things that we've put into the sandbox, and we're hoping that we could go to market with it.
Right. I'm talking about tech savvy and, innovation and digital age. How is this regulatory sandbox going to engender innovation and synergy between the insurance space, the insurance companies, and fintech?
Okay, we have seen what fintech has done in the banking sector. There's so many fintech organizations they're playing today that have allowed a lot more people to have financial inclusion. We want to believe that from the statistics available, insurance penetration is less than 1%. The average young person, the average Nigerian does not have insurance. So we believe with this sandbox, with the fintechs, we will now have the growth of InsurTech. InsurTech would allow you to do your insurance and Takaful plans, policies online. With that in play, that will increase penetration in the market. And that's what we're all trying to achieve. Not just at the Takaful side, but the whole insurance side. We want to make that 1%, 2%, 3%, 4%, to have a lot more people feel safe, feel happy, feel able to access insurance. We want to move away from those days of agents going from house to house, knocking from office to office, but having it on your phones to ensure that you can access your plans. But more importantly, we say in the insurance industry, we're in the business of paying claims. At the end of the day, that's what we are doing, to ensure that when a participant or a policyholder has a claim, he or she is able to access the benefits from that. So you should be able to have that start to finish on your phone. And you can imagine what difference that will make. It will reduce the bureaucracy and so on.
Right. Okay. Risk management is very critical in the industry space, in the insurance industry space. I mean, it deals with numbers and figures, which is very, very personal. So with the Takaful insurance operators and enterprise risk management framework, how can this, help mitigate risk in the insurance space?
So I always say it's difficult to mitigate risk. What you need to do is manage risk, which is where the phrase risk management is. Insurance is all about risk management. That's all we do. Under the Takaful model, you share your risk. Under the conventional insurance, you transfer your risk. So for any Takaful operator to operate, or any insurance company, you must have adequate Takaful or reinsurance in place. If you do not have that, you will not be able to operate. NAICOM will not even allow you to operate. So what we do under the Takaful model is, once we take on the risk, we share that risk with the Takaful operator to ensure that if anything happens, especially on the larger risk, we have additional backup. Under the Takaful model, because it's risk sharing, the risk fund, which is managed by the Takaful operator, has that second base defense, and that's where you go back to the Takaful. So when the fund, when the claim is bigger than the fund, you have additional backup to go back to, an additional and additional. It goes on like that. Takaful is a very, very technical thing. And it has to be done right. In-house, we have Takaful officers who are constantly checking Takaful. And it's not just going about to Takaful. Takaful can also mean I give my part of my business to other Takaful operators. Where I carry a risk that is bigger than my capacity, I can now share it with another Takaful operator and see that just in case there's that support. And this is done on a regular basis. It's done on a daily basis. So that would ensure that at every point in time, the risk fund is safeguarded, the participants are in a comfortable position, and the liability or contingent liability is not too much on the Takaful operators. And that's what we do on a daily basis. But I'll tell you the first step of risk management in insurance and Takaful is taking the risk from day one and pricing the risk adequately. If you talk to your participants or your customers or your clients, what you need to do is ask so many questions. And once you ask those questions, you're able to price that risk adequately. So you may have a friend who may have a higher exposure to risk because of where he or she lives. Okay? So I may charge you a lower amount because you have a lower risk profile. So risk profiles determine the amount. That's the first level of risk management that we do. Once we do that pricing right, then we come back indoors, do the risk Takaful, and then share the risk if and when necessary.
Interesting. Thank you so much, Aminu. That was, an interesting session. I am enlightened, and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Rama. I hope you have taken a policy, or you will take a policy or plan with Nur Takaful.
I think this should be an indoor conversation. But yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for coming over.
The adoption of Islamic insurance or Takaful will be a spur in the right direction. Especially in this critical stage of financial inclusion, with low financial inclusion in Nigeria. Well then, with that, I say don't forget to keep it to date with us next week on the program. Follow us on all our social media platforms displayed on the screen. Thank you for watching. I am Rahma Say Muhammad.